We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. on a week-to-week basis as we're looking around the globe for those organizations that are making a difference in the emerging world and in these what they call emerging market nations, working and focusing on youth and also women, and how that we're bringing more business, entrepreneurship, education, healthcare, all this into these local communities, but allowing the communities to have the pride that they're actually doing this themselves. It's not something that's being imposed from the outside. They request, and at the same time is that they learn how to use this and become leaders with their own communities. And I have a gentleman who is doing great work on the continent of Africa. This is Darren Tipton. He's the CEO and founder of what's called Project Humanity. He's coming in by Skype. And Darren, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV. Oh, okay. We need to get his sound up there. Darren?
Can you hear me now?
We got you. Thank you.
All right.
You got a great voice, so we don't want to lose it.
Thank you.
Anyway,
thanks for having me on the program.
No, thank you for being with us, and you're doing really outstanding work. Tell our domestic and international viewers a little bit about your organization called Project Humanity, and tell us how you came up with that name, because you're the founder, so you certainly should know.
Thank you for asking. To answer your question, how did I come up with the name Project Humanity? I was driving down the street one day, and it came to my mind. I asked a colleague to go and see if the website was available, and it's not a real elaborate story, but that's how it came to be. We are an NGO focused, as you said, in working in Africa right now, the country of Kenya. So that's where we're working.
And you're talking about where you're working, but tell us a little bit about Kenya, the country of Kenya, where it is for some of our people that may have been a long time since they had their geography lesson. And then what region of the country are you in? Because I've been to Kenya a number of times, but I actually haven't been to the locality where you're actually doing your work.
Sure. So Kenya is in East Africa, right on the equator, and we are working in very rural western Kenya. So if you can picture Kenya and Uganda, we're literally a mile from the Ugandan border on Lake Victoria, and it's 3 small islands that we work on there. Our primary location is Rusinga Island.
Yeah, and I actually, as I was telling you earlier, actually set up the Sister City program with Roanoke, Virginia, and Kisumu, Kenya, which you should know well because of the location where you're working. And that really is quite different, that whole region in there, than the Rift Valley area, which is the central part of the country, and then, of course, the east, which is going towards the seacoast. So tell us a little bit of the differences that you see among the people there and also the geography and terrain.
Sure. So, I think you mentioned it. The east is the seacoast, and then Nairobi's kind of mid-central to the country. And then the Rift Valley, which actually spans a couple thousand miles and has got a rich history of its own. But you come from Nairobi through the Rift Valley, through the tea lands where they grow a lot of the good Kenyan tea. And then you make it to a very arid area. Rusinga Island and the 3 islands we're on are arid. So the people there are very warm. Obviously, it's very tribal in Kenya, and the tribe that we work with predominantly is the Lua tribe. But they are, characteristically, they are warm and welcoming and very hospitable, much like you would expect. They do have rich tradition, a lot of the African tradition, but the area you work on is what I would use the word safe and warm.
That's fantastic. There's 3 primary programs that you focus on through Project Humanity and really leading to women's empowerment. So one, let's talk about those 3 programs, but why really the focus as far as the females of these various families within these communities?
I like both questions. I like to use the term healthy, wealthy, and wise. So we focus on women because they are the core of the community. They're the ones who bear the children. They're the ones out working. They're the ones carrying a lot of the burden. And so the 3 areas are health, prenatal health and healthy deliveries, and women's health. including the transmission of HIV from mom to child, which we can deal with. Literacy, when a woman knows how to read, she knows how to do bookkeeping, she knows how to get her kids and feels it's important to get her children in school. And then really the key component here is how do they make a living for their need to eat and provide for their family. So I use the term healthy, wealthy, and wise, and when you've addressed those three needs, you have provided a climate, and if you want to use the word empowered, you've empowered women to do the things most critical to life.
And one of the things in your charter and mission and goals is really an emphasis on international volunteerism. And of course, we know that the United States really is a world leader as far as volunteerism and people getting involved in their own communities. But you're leveraging this and taking it to a very remote area within Kenya, which many people would think it's actually remote within itself. So looking at these three programs that you have, how are you involving the international volunteerism, and why do you make that a cornerstone of your organization?
I answer it very simply, and it seemed too simple, that the heart of a volunteer, the passion that comes with that, the experience, the training, that is, the impact is immeasurable, the opportunity is immeasurable. And I call it the secret sauce. It's the secret sauce to our success, that we are a very grassroots driven organization, and we focus in those three areas we just talked about by bringing skilled professionals, college students. And it's, as you know, you've traveled quite a bit, and it's an education to be in another culture, hear the different languages, see different cultures and customs. But more than that, there's a certain element of being neighborly that seems to lack in our world. So to be clear, I very much see this as being neighbors. Yeah, I have a flushing toilet and they may not. I have running water, they may not. It doesn't make my situation better or worse. It's just that when you take volunteers, people with good intentions and goodwill, to go somewhere and stand beside people who want to grow, want to learn, and can identify key things they want to accomplish in their community, the sky's the limit.
I tell you, I think it's just fantastic, absolutely, what you're doing. What are some of the major challenges? We talked about, you know, the flushing toilets and running water. We see this area is very dry and arid, and so that's a real issue as far as agriculture and people being able to feed themselves. So what are some of the challenges that you're faced with, and how do you think that being an international NGO like yours, that this is really important that you actually be there beyond just being neighborly and friendly, but how getting to the core of what these people really need and actually what they want to have?
Well, I think you said it, get to the core of what they need and what they need to survive in a successful way. So obviously clean water is a huge challenge. There's lots of potential, and a lot of times a little bit of education with a lot of potential goes a very long ways. So for example, helping the women come together and create, we call them SACOs, which is basically formally organized business groups, and start rotating savings and credit where each person is contributing $1. Over the time, we match that with a grant, and they can borrow against this. Now, the challenge is there's not money to start new businesses. There's not money to do business. If you teach them to save, teach them to budget, teach them to, basic business practices, which we can, and then you provide a little bit of microfinancing, they suddenly have a mechanism that they can do business, that they can make money to send the kids to school. So their challenges are very much like ours: clean water, a way to grow food in an arid place, a way to do business so that they can provide for their families. And so it's interesting when you combine a little bit of standing with someone and the idea that these challenges can be met when you stand together.
Yeah, and I'd like to go back to this slide we just had up there as far as the children concerned in school, because this gives our viewers, both domestically and internationally, what these children are willing to go through in order to have an education, and why it's even so important that they actually do have an education. What defines success as far as your organization, Project Humanity?
This is a great idea, and there's so much focus on measuring impact for NGOs, and it has to be there. You know, and I have to answer it two ways, because we've identified kind of a two-tier approach to work, and that is, what's the success in taking a humanitarian volunteer? One is that they go, they have an amazing experience, they see what happens when you work together in a different community, in a far away place like Africa or Kenya. But then they come home, the success is they come home, they engage in a Rotary Club, or they engage in civic or service organizations in their own town, or a church. A lot of churches do outreach. So that would be, to me, part of the measurable success. What'd you do when you left? And I think locally it's seeing when you drive off each time and you look in your rearview mirror to say, okay, a year ago this wasn't happening, and we're leaving now, our staff stays, but there's still work continuing that they've owned, and they are growing new businesses, they're growing new opportunities, they're putting their kids in school, that type of thing. So I think there's those measurements we make very scientifically, but then there's also the, you know, what's going on when we leave.
Yeah, looking at this, and I'm going to come up with the logo here for your organization, but what are people taking with them, the volunteers, when they leave, and what are they leaving behind in these communities? And I think I have an idea of some of what you're going to say, but I'm going to let you do that.
All right. I am not a big fan of the stop, drop, and roll. In other words, pull up, drop 8 off, and then roll out. So they are bringing their hearts. I can, you know, all of us who are doing this type of work were influenced at some time or another by a mentor, somebody who had made a big difference in our life, encouraged us, challenged us. And it goes back to the basic fundamental of being human. What does it mean to care for others? It's not bringing your old used clothes or items to drop off, you know, and we do bring some things that we give to the people. But I think it's being cognizant of the fact that help starts in the heart.
And I knew that was exactly what you were going to answer, but I wanted you to share that, because you're taking your heart and you're leaving your heart, but also you're bringing back the hearts of the people that you're working with in Kenya and Africa. Darren Tipton, CEO, founder, Project Humanity, as we create